The day I finally decided to leave Clara, a relentless downpour was soaking the city, and the anesthetic from my surgery had only just begun to wear off, leaving a dull throb in its wake. She held an umbrella beside me, her quick, impatient steps setting a pace I couldn't possibly match. She moved so swiftly that she didn't even seem to register when she had pulled ahead, leaving me exposed to the cold, driving rain that immediately began to soak through the thin fabric of my jacket. A sudden wave of dizziness washed over my post-operative body, and my hand shot out, struggling to find purchase on a nearby metal railing to steady myself. Through the shimmering sheet of rain, I could see her pause, but only to tap the crystal face of her watch, a clear sign of her annoyance at the delay. Her custom-made Italian heels, a source of immense pride for her, remained firmly planted on the pavement several feet away from where I stood, a stark measurement of the distance she always kept between us. In that moment, watching her stand there, a profound sense of exhaustion settled deep into my bones. In the 3 years we had been together, it felt as though she had never once considered slowing her pace for me. I was perpetually the one in her shadow, watching her back as she forged ahead, my own legs hurrying to catch up to a future she had already decided on. It was a stark contrast to what I had witnessed just a few days ago, when I saw her walking with her first love, Julian. There was nothing overtly intimate in their interaction, yet an incredible closeness radiated from them, a shared and quiet warmth that I had never been privy to. She had deliberately slowed her stride to match his, a small but significant gesture that spoke volumes. It made me wonder if, in all those 3 years, I had ever truly been the one she wanted by her side. Clara seemed to have no concept of how utterly draining it is to always be the one doing the chasing, the one putting in the effort to close a gap that the other person creates. And so this time I decided to let go. As the late autumn evening wind whipped past, the thermos I was clutching in my arms began to lose its warmth, a mirror to the chilling realization dawning on me. I stood frozen, unable to compel my legs to move an inch. Directly in front of me, on a path that wound near the hospital's inpatient wing, Clara was walking shoulder to shoulder with a man. She would occasionally glance to her side to speak with him, and even in the sterile white of a doctor's coat, she possessed a presence that made her stand out effortlessly in any crowd. I recognized the man instantly, having seen his face in a small, protected photo album on Clara's phone. It was Julian, her first love. Back when I had first discovered the photos, she had explained it all away with a casual wave of her hand. "We were together in college for a while," she'd said. "He went overseas to study, so we ended it." Her tone had been perfectly calm, without even a hint of underlying emotion. But the scene unfolding before me now told a different story. Walking beside him, her eyes were alive with a light I hadn't seen in years, a vibrancy that was never directed at me. There was nothing overtly familiar about their body language, yet they were enveloped in an aura of quiet intimacy, a comfortable warmth that spoke of a deep and shared history. I had no idea when Julian had returned to the country, and frankly, I had no desire to know what he was saying to her that kept that gentle smile from ever leaving her eyes. The only thing my mind could focus on, the one detail that burned itself into my memory, was the way Clara deliberately slowed her pace when she walked with him. Clara was tall, with a naturally long and fast stride that I was intimately familiar with. Whenever we walked together, she was always several paces ahead of me, a solitary figure I was meant to follow. She never reached back to hold my hand, never paused to wait for me to catch up. But now, she was acutely aware of Julian's slightly quickened breathing as they talked and laughed, and she purposefully adjusted her own speed, shortening her steps to match his more leisurely rhythm. She was waiting for him. A fine, sharp pain, like a needle, spread through my chest. Over the past 3 years, I had lost count of the number of times I had asked her, pleaded with her, to wait for me when we walked. Her response was always the same: a cold, indifferent dismissal of my feelings, a complete lack of concern for my thoughts. She would simply pinch the bridge of her nose, her face transforming into a mask of pure exasperation and impatience. "Adam, can you please stop being so unreasonable?" she would sigh. "Does walking quickly mean I don't love you? If that's the conclusion you want to jump to, then there's nothing I can do to stop you." Every single one of our arguments ended in this way, with my concerns being casually brushed aside with the excuse that I was simply overthinking everything, and for 3 whole years I had foolishly believed her half-hearted explanations, lying to myself because the truth was too painful to accept. Now, watching them together, every deliberately slow step Clara took felt like a stinging slap across my face. Perhaps in 3 years of dating, I was never the one she truly cherished. As they continued to chat, Julian smiled and reached out, his fingers gently tracing the watch on Clara's wrist. "After all these years, you still have it," he murmured. The silver of the watch gleamed coldly under the hospital lights. It was a watch Clara never, ever let me touch. The only time she would ever remove it was when we were in bed together, lost in a moment of passion, and even then, she would carefully and deliberately place it on the nightstand as if it were a sacred object. Otherwise, it never left her wrist. But now, she was allowing Julian to trace the delicate engraving on the inside of the band without a hint of protest. I took a deep, shuddering breath and looked up at the ceiling, trying my best to fight back the hot sting of tears in my eyes. It was then that Clara finally caught sight of me out of the corner of her eye. Her animated expression froze for a fraction of a second, replaced by a frown as her gaze fell to the thermos in my arms. "Adam, what are you doing here?" We were in her office, just the two of us. She had already sent Julian on his way, an unconscious protective reflex that I had seen her display before. The window was slightly ajar, and a cool cross breeze blew through the room, making my eyes, still sore from unshed tears, sting painfully. After a long and heavy silence, she turned around and let out a weary sigh. "Julian and I are colleagues now. You shouldn't read too much into it." I remained quiet, unable to form a response. "Here's the seafood chowder you wanted," I said, my voice flat. "If there's nothing else, I'm leaving." For a split second, a look of blank confusion crossed Clara's face. "That I wanted?" she asked, before comprehension slowly dawned. "Didn't you specifically ask me for it last night?" The night before, seemingly on a whim, she had asked if I knew how to make a proper seafood chowder. I had no idea what had prompted the question, but I still spent hours online, finding a video tutorial and carefully learning how to make it from scratch. The realization settled on Clara's face, and she frowned. "Oh, right. Julian wanted some. He was asking me if I knew anywhere in the city that made a good one, and I was just asking you in passing." She turned away from me then, casually picking up a work report from her desk and flipping through its pages as if I were no longer in the room. Her voice was nonchalant as she added, "From now on, you probably shouldn't come to the hospital so much, unless it's something important." A crushing tightness squeezed my heart, making it difficult to breathe. Suddenly, I couldn't pretend anymore. "Stay away from the hospital? Is that so I don't interrupt you and Julian rekindling your old flame, like I did today?" "Adam." Clara's eyes turned to ice, and the hand that was flipping through the report froze in mid-air. "What is your problem now?" She stared at me with a coldness that made me feel like a complete stranger. "Think whatever you want. There is nothing going on between Julian and me." She was always so composed, so rarely showing any real anger, but now she was completely losing her cool over another man. As we stood there, locked in a tense standoff, the door pushed open and Julian walked in, holding a stack of files. "Clara, about tomorrow's surgical schedule." He stopped when he saw the tears welling in my eyes and feigned an apologetic confusion. "Oh, am I interrupting something?" Seeing Julian, Clara's expression visibly softened, the harsh lines around her mouth easing. "Not at all," she said, her voice gentle again. "He's just leaving." I let out a bitter, humorless laugh and turned to go. As I walked out, I heard their voices behind me. "Was that your fiancé bringing you lunch?" Julian asked. Clara didn't say anything, but her silence was all the permission he needed to open the thermos. "Seafood chowder?" I heard him say, his voice laced with smug pleasure. "I haven't eaten either. Mind if I join you?" Clara didn't respond. She just walked to the door, gave me one last heavy look, and then closed it firmly behind me. I went home alone, and by the time I arrived, night had completely fallen. The enormous house we shared was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop, the silence amplifying my own sense of emptiness. I was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights, when my phone suddenly rang. It was a pre-recorded birthday message my dad had made for me before he passed away. "Adam, today is your 27th birthday. Dad wishes you a happy birthday." His voice, warm and familiar, echoed in the empty house. "By my count, you and Clara have been together for 3 years now. Are you two married yet? Are you happy? Even though I'm not there with you, son, remember to always love yourself." My dad's voice filled the quiet space, and a sharp sting returned to my nose. I hung up the phone. I had met Clara through an arranged setup. At the time, my dad was in the final stages of lung cancer, and his biggest regret in life was that he wouldn't get to see me settle down and get married. I wasn't really in the right headspace for a relationship. I just wanted to do something to make him happy in his final days, to go through the motions for his sake. When I first met Clara, her cool, self-possessed demeanor convinced me that this was just an act for her as well, something we were both being reluctantly forced into by our families. But to my complete surprise, after our very first meeting, Clara began to pursue me with an unexpected intensity. She knew that my dad was sick, so she introduced me to the best doctors she knew, helped me decipher the complicated lab reports I couldn't understand, and even taught me how to use different massage techniques to help ease his pain. With her by my side, those long, terrifying nights in the hospital, warped by the constant smell of disinfectant, slowly started to feel hopeful again. During my dad's final moments, she confessed her feelings for me, promising that she would be good to me for the rest of our lives. I cried and nodded, accepting her proposal. Through my tear-blurred vision, I completely missed the placid calm in her eyes, a strange detachment, as if she were simply completing a mission she had been assigned. Not long after we officially started dating, she suddenly began staying out all night, becoming incredibly distant and emotionally unavailable. That was when I first found out about Julian. All the way across the ocean, he had gotten back in touch with her. That night, she suffered a rare bout of insomnia. I found her leaning against the balcony railing, the red tip of her cigarette glowing like a lonely star in the darkness. Later, she posted something on her social media feed, a post that was visible only to Julian. "I act tough, but I never said I wasn't willing to wait for you." Clara didn't get home until well after midnight, bringing a damp, wintry chill in with her when she finally walked through the door. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I kept my eyes lightly closed, pretending to be asleep. She didn't remember it was my birthday. Tossing her expensive trench coat onto a chair, she talked on the phone with a friend. "I mean, you and Julian were so in love back then," her friend was saying, "but you just had to break up. And now he's back, but you're about to get married to someone else. He clearly came back for you, Clara. What are you going to do?" She leaned against the sofa, her silhouette stark and cold in the dim moonlight filtering through the window. After a long, drawn-out silence, she finally spoke. "I don't want to trap him in a marriage too early. He's a free spirit. He should see the world before deciding where to land." There was a pause. As for Adam, my breath caught in my throat. "He's very domestic," she continued, her voice devoid of any warmth. "My parents have always wanted me to settle down, so I did what they wanted. I went on the blind date and found the kind of domestic partner they were hoping for. I'm already engaged to him. The rest of my life is just going to be marrying him and having children. I'll keep playing the part." Her voice was utterly flat, completely devoid of any emotion. In that moment, something inside me snapped with a clean, final break. Before, I would have analyzed her every word, every action, desperately searching for any proof that she loved me. Even though she always forgot my birthday, never waited for me when we walked, and rarely showed any interest in my thoughts or feelings, I would always force myself to think back to the memory of her steady shoulder when I was at my lowest, the lingering warmth of her fingers brushing away my tears, her clumsy but earnest kiss the night we got engaged. I would always find reasons, make endless excuses for her behavior, but now that the tidal wave of my affection for her had finally receded, I had to admit the cold, hard truth. For her, our so-called love was nothing more than a reluctant performance. She had never truly loved me. In this relationship, she was always the one in control, moving with a calculated ease that left me constantly off balance. And I was the one who was always running away from the truth, covering my ears and pretending to be happy. I ran a fever that night and didn't sleep well at all. When I woke up in the morning, the space next to me in the bed was already empty and cold. I found Clara in the entryway, adjusting the collar of her trench coat, her expression as indifferent as ever. The engagement ring she had taken off the night before was tossed in a corner of her jewelry box, glinting coldly in the morning light. It hit me then that she hadn't actually worn it for days. She used to wear it occasionally, mostly to placate me after an argument, but from the day Julian came back into her life, the ring on her finger had vanished, leaving only a faint, fading mark on her skin. The difference between love and no love was so painfully obvious. Clara looked back and saw me standing stunned at the top of the stairs. On a strange, uncharacteristic impulse, she walked over and gently stroked my hair. For a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of emotion, a hope that maybe I had been wrong. But it vanished the instant a notification popped up on her phone. It was a message from Julian. "I'm off to work." I didn't snap out of my daze until I heard the roar of her car's engine starting in the driveway. Suddenly, I felt so incredibly tired. For 3 years, this brief, almost formal show of affection right before she left for the day was a daily routine. But I never actually felt any sweetness or warmth from it. It felt more like placating a business partner than showing love to a fiancé. In those 3 years, Clara hadn't been terrible to me, not in a conventional sense. After we got engaged, she gave me her supplementary credit card to use as I pleased. She took care of all the major chores and decisions around the house so that I wouldn't have to worry about them. If I casually mentioned wanting something, she would almost always agree to buy it for me. On the surface, everything seemed perfectly fine, except for one thing that was just fundamentally wrong. It was all too polite, too formal. So formal that there wasn't an ounce of real, genuine feeling for me behind any of it. It was all just going through the motions. She and Julian had a past that I could never be a part of, a deep chasm between them that I could never hope to cross. If there was no love, why was I still holding on? Maybe letting go was so much easier than continuing to hold on. The autumn rain was relentless that week, carrying a bleak chill that seemed to seep into my bones. My lower abdomen had been aching since I got to work that morning. A dull, persistent pain that was getting steadily worse. Now, standing by the printer, I could barely straighten up. On the verge of passing out, I had to call Clara, but call after call went straight to her voicemail. It wasn't until a concerned coworker called an ambulance for me and was helping me onto the gurney that my phone finally dinged with a notification. It was a text from Clara. In a meeting. The message was short, concise as always, with no extra words of care or concern. It seemed she really was busy. At the hospital, the overhead light streaked past my eyes in a blurry line. The cold sweat on my back had completely soaked the blue sheet on the gurney. I weakly opened my eyes, and just one glance was enough to recognize Clara. She was speaking in a soft, low voice, explaining the details of a surgical case to Julian, completely absorbed in their conversation. They stood very close, with Julian intimately at her side, listening intently. So this was her important meeting. As the gurney rolled forward, nearly bumping into Julian, she instinctively pulled him behind her, shielding him with her own body. It wasn't until the hem of her white coat brushed against my dangling arm that she reflexively looked back. Shock flashed in her eyes, and her breath hitched in her throat. I managed a small, bitter smile and closed my eyes, not wanting to look at her anymore. When I came to, I was in a sterile hospital room. Clara, tall and striking in her white coat, stood at the foot of my bed with her back to me. Sensing that I was awake, she walked over, pinching the bridge of her nose in a gesture of weariness. Her first words to me were an accusation. "What happened? You have appendicitis, and you didn't even think to tell me?" Perhaps seeing how pale and weak I looked, her tone softened a little. "Don't you know that this can be life-threatening if it gets serious?" I didn't look at her, just stared blankly at the acoustic tiles of the ceiling. "You were in a meeting," I said flatly, "with Julian." Clara froze for a second, then shoved her hands into the deep pockets of her coat, her face darkening. "Julian and I are not on the same path anymore. There's absolutely nothing going on between us." Her brow furrowed with unconcealed annoyance and impatience. "Adam, being this unreasonable all the time is getting really old." Clara was nowhere to be seen for the next few days. A few days later, during morning rounds, it was Julian who came to check on me. He held my chart in his hands, and the silver men's watch on his wrist, a matching couple's watch to the one Clara wore, clinked softly against the metal clipboard. "Mr. Croft, you're recovering well. You should be able to go home soon." He looked down to jot down my vitals, the pen scratching against the paper. "Clara drank a bit too much at a staff gathering last night," he said conversationally. "I took her home. It's a shame, really. I was the one who had to remind her about her emergency meeting this morning." My hand, which had been searching for a moving company online on my phone, paused mid-scroll. I slowly looked up at him. "You must be very happy with Clara, right?" I asked, my voice strained. He snapped the chart shut, a strange triumphant curve to his lips. "Well, when we were together, she was so clingy and affectionate. Back then, if I even mentioned wanting some trendy new pastry, she'd wait in line all night just to buy it for me. If I had so much as a headache, she would worry herself sick and want to rush me to the hospital. She even had to hold my hand while she was driving. Isn't that ridiculous?" It was ridiculous. Clara had given her absolute best to Julian. She would worry about him taking the crowded subway, nag him for not eating on time, and see a beautiful view and immediately think of taking him there on a trip. For me, there was only endless, perfunctory coldness. Julian stood up and gave me a slight smile, one that was full of arrogance and triumph. Once a woman gives all her love away, she can't really love again. What can you do? Love is all about timing. Mr. Croft, you'll just have to bear with it. The day I was discharged, it started to rain again. Clara came to pick me up. The car was parked in the surface lot across from the entrance. She stood under the eaves, holding an umbrella, waiting for me. As I got closer, she reached out to take my bag, but I instinctively dodged her hand. She froze for a moment, her thin lips pressing into a hard, unforgiving line. She opened her mouth a few times, as if struggling to find the right words, before finally speaking. The State Department suddenly put together an expert panel a few days ago. I wasn't at the hospital. The umbrella in her hand suddenly tilted, and the curtain of rain cast a dark shadow over her face. I gave a faint, "Uh-huh," and pulled my coat tighter around myself, not bothering to ask about the night she got drunk, and Julian was the one who took her home. At this point, if she didn't want to bring it up, I no longer had any desire to know the details. Seeing my silence, the veins on the back of the hand gripping the umbrella handle bulged. "Are you really going to do this now?" she asked, her voice tight with frustration. I didn't answer her. I just felt tired, a deep, soul-crushing weariness. "Let's go," she said finally. Clara walked as fast as ever. Just like always, she rushed ahead, completely oblivious to my struggle to keep up behind her. I gradually fell behind, and the cold rain quickly soaked through my clothes, a deep chill seeping straight into my bones. Clara still didn't notice my miserable state. Her pace only seemed to quicken. I suddenly remembered the day I saw her walking with Julian, her deliberately slower pace for him, each of those careful steps landing like a hammer blow on my heart. My body, still weak and recovering from surgery, was hit with a sudden wave of dizziness, and my legs gave out from under me. I struggled to grab a nearby metal railing for support, only to see that dozens of feet away, Clara had already reached the car and was calmly adjusting her collar. The moment she looked up and saw me, she tapped her watch through the rain. "Hurry up," her voice carried faintly. "I have surgery this afternoon." And those feet, encased in their expensive custom Italian heels, remained firmly planted on the ground, a few steps away from me. I heard a faint, shattering sound deep inside me, the sound of something breaking into a bloody, messy pulp that could never be put back together. She would never wait for me. She wouldn't even look back for me. My eyes had embraced the sight of her retreating back countless times, only to chase after her alone after each fresh moment of disappointment. But this time, I didn't follow. I stood my ground, staring at her across the rain-swept parking lot. I watched Clara's expression shift from calm indifference to a frown of confusion, and then to that familiar look of profound impatience. "Clara," I called out, my voice stronger than I expected. "This is it. Let's break up." I once heard someone say that when you don't know if you should continue a relationship, you should just look deep into each other's eyes, because eyes don't lie. And in my brief moment of eye contact with Clara across the parking lot, her eyes were like a dead, stagnant lake, without a single ripple of emotion. But I had clearly seen the shimmering light, the deep and undeniable affection in her eyes when she looked at Julian. That kind of love is impossible to hide. So when she left me standing there again, looking at me with nothing but confusion, I truly had no desire to take another step forward in her direction, but this time, for the first time, Clara finally knew to walk back toward me. Her steps were urgent, splashing through the puddles. When she stood in front of me, her shadow blocked out all the light. "Adam, what do you mean by that? What are you throwing a fit about now? I drove all night through a storm just to pick you up from the hospital, and I have back-to-back meetings this afternoon. I'm exhausted." Perhaps because I so rarely raised my voice or argued with her, she was genuinely furious. "What am I throwing a fit about?" I held up my rain-soaked sleeve. "Clara, in 3 years together, did you ever really love me? You never remember what I like. I hate mushrooms, but every meal we ate together was full of them, just because Julian likes them. You don't remember my birthday either. For 3 years, I've spent every single birthday alone, without so much as a happy birthday from you. But you make sure to send Julian a message right at midnight on his birthday every single year, and you couldn't care less about my feelings. You've never once waited for me when we walk. I'm always stumbling along behind you, trying to catch up. Even today, when I just had surgery, in the pouring rain, you wouldn't even look back for me. Through the rain, her perpetually cool and composed expression finally cracked. She stood there, holding the umbrella, silent for a long, long time. Clara, the person you love is clearly Julian. So why were you so determined to marry me? What were you planning to do, marry someone you don't love, and then spend the rest of your life reminiscing about the one you do? Let me tell you something, Clara. That's disgusting. Who wants to be a tool for you to mourn your ex? Clara stared at me, stunned, as if she never expected me to be capable of saying such things. The umbrella in her hand tilted for a second. The scales in her heart finally seemed to tip in my favor, for once. After a long silence, she spoke slowly, her voice uncharacteristically soft. Adam, you're just angry right now. I'm not going to take what you said today to heart. I'll wait for you to cool down. I didn't go home that night. My best friend Mark found me at a barbecue joint on the side of the road, the kind of place Clara would never have been caught dead in. She always said she was a germaphobe and thought these kinds of places were dirty and beneath her. So for the 3 years we were together, I barely touched this kind of food. It wasn't until Julian bragged to my face about how Clara used to peel crawfish for him and ate with him at all the little food stalls in their college town that I realized it had nothing to do with being a germaphobe. Her preferences and exceptions were just never for me. Mark sat across from me, his expression a mixture of shock and confusion. You and Clara broke up? Are you serious about this? I couldn't blame him for his reaction. After all, when Clara first came into my life and helped me take care of my dad, I was so incredibly grateful and had fallen completely in love with her. Back then, I was terrified of losing my only remaining family member and desperately needed someone, anyone, to lean on. So later, when she let just a tiny bit of what I perceived as love slip through her fingers, I was completely captured by it. I took a long swig of beer and looked at Mark seriously. Yeah, I told her it was over. Adam, are you sure you don't love her anymore? You won't regret this. I nodded firmly. There was a time when I loved her very much. The way she shone when we first met, and the support she gave me during my darkest days, that sustained me through years of a lonely pursuit. I tried so hard, Mark, but with Julian around, I could never get into her world, and I could never see what was truly in her heart. Even at our most intimate moments, when she would hold me, her dark eyes held more resignation than passion, more loneliness than love. Because of it, I was constantly tearing myself down. I started secretly comparing myself to Julian, competing with a ghost in the shadows. In the end, all I got for my efforts was a body full of scars. So I gave up. Clara is just too cold. She doesn't know how to love anyone. Dude, you were the one who got hurt in that relationship, Mark said, raising his beer bottle and clinking it against mine. Here's to my handsome friend Adam finally ending his 3-year emotional entanglement. Today, right here, right now, he's finally completely let it go. His eyes were sparkling with genuine happiness for me. I smiled and clinked my glass with his. The bubbles burst in the cold liquid fizzing in my mouth, and suddenly I felt a profound sense of release. Life is short. Why should I waste it obsessing over something that was never truly mine to begin with? Here's to the past I'm not looking back to, and to a free tomorrow. On the way back to Mark's place, it started raining unexpectedly. My phone dinged. It was a text from Clara. It's 10 p.m. When are you coming home?" She still thought I was just throwing a childish tantrum, as if my declaration of breaking up today meant absolutely nothing. After all, in her mind, she hadn't really done anything wrong. She was just a little careless, a little lacking in day-to-day affection. She just had some necessary work-related contact with her ex-boyfriend. It was just me being angry for a moment. I'd cool down, and everything would go back to being fine. She never took my pain seriously. She just thought I was being unreasonable. I ignored her text and swiped the message away. A few minutes later, she called. I didn't answer. She called again every few minutes, persistently. I almost had to laugh. Clara was always so calm and composed. Nothing I ever did seemed to faze her. But right now, she had stubbornly called me almost 10 times in a row. When the last call came through, I finally picked up. Her first words were, "Where are you?" Her tone was urgent, as if she were genuinely worried. When I didn't respond immediately, she seemed to catch herself and reverted to her usual accusatory tone. "Adam, are you drunk again? If you get wasted again this time, I'm not coming to pick you up." When I had first found out about Julian, I'd had a huge fight with her, broken up with her in a fit of pure anger, and then gone to a bar to get drunk. But I was younger then, more hot-headed, and ultimately unwilling to truly let go. In the end, I had pathetically called Clara and asked her to come get me. I remember it clearly. When she came to pick me up that day, her expression was calm and indifferent, but she had dark circles under her eyes. I hadn't come home, and she hadn't gone to sleep, waiting up for me until midnight. As I drunkenly collapsed onto her, choking out her name, I heard her whisper a very, very soft, "I'm sorry," into the wind. The cold night wind filled my lungs now. I let out a long breath and said to Clara on the other end of the line, "Clara, I already broke up with you today. I'm not coming back. In a couple of days, a moving company will come to get my things." There was a long, stunned silence on the other end. "Adam, are you serious?" "Of course," I said. "I'm dead serious." I hung up the phone, blocked her number, pulled my coat tighter around me, and disappeared into the stormy night. I rented a new apartment, a simple one-bedroom. It wasn't nearly as luxurious as Clara's spacious high-rise apartment, but it was more than enough for one person. After the breakup, I suddenly had a lot more free time on my hands. Before, I was always busy after work, learning to cook different complicated dishes to please Clara's mother. Now I had time to do things I actually enjoyed, or to just hang out with my friends. Clara's mother was a very traditional and conservative housewife. She had only agreed to let me into their family because she saw how devotedly I had cared for my own father when he was sick. She thought I was reliable, and more importantly, easy to control. The very first time we met, she had strongly hinted that after we got married, I should quit my job to be a stay-at-home husband and support my wife's burgeoning career. So every single weekend, I had to wake up at the crack of dawn and drive 2 hours with Clara to the suburbs to see her parents. I had to sit there and listen to her traditional, conservative parents lecture me again and again. I had to listen to her mother criticize Julian for being unreliable, for running all over the world instead of settling down. I really, really hated it. But because of Clara, I never pushed back. Thank God I was free now, physically and mentally free. No one could decide for me whether I stayed home or went out with friends after work. And no one could pull at my heartstrings and make me sad anymore. This Sunday, for the first time in ages, I slept in until 10 a.m. But then the moving company called. "Mr. Croft? Miss Vance says you have to come over in person. She won't open the door for us otherwise." Through the phone, I could clearly hear Clara's cold, imperious voice in the background. "Adam, even if you're moving out, the least you can do is show up and pack your own things. Otherwise, I'm not letting a bunch of strangers into my home." When I got to Clara's place, She was leaning against the door in a standoff with the movers. When she saw me, her gaze lingered on me for a few seconds. Then she shook her head slightly, her tone mocking. "Adam, what on earth did I do to you in these 3 years to make you block my number so quickly? Now I have to go through someone else just to get a call through to you?" We had lived under the same roof for 3 years, and Clara was still just as arrogant as the day I met her. She was cold, distant, like a stranger just passing through my life. Even now, she refused to lower her proud head. "Clara, if this is all you wanted to say to me, then we really don't need to talk." I walked straight past her into the apartment and motioned for the movers to come in. Clara pressed her lips together into a thin line, but didn't say another word, though her eyes followed my every move. She watched me direct the movers, telling them what to take and what to leave. Several times, she looked like she wanted to say something, her expression conflicted and unreadable. The clothes in the closet went from a variety of styles to just my simple business attire. The expensive pots and pans I had bought for the kitchen disappeared one by one from the countertops. It wasn't until I started taking down the photo wall in the living room that Clara finally couldn't take it anymore. She stood directly in front of me, blocking my way, her height giving her an intimidating presence. "Adam, what are you doing? I'm in those pictures too. I don't agree to you taking them." Most of these photos were taken on important occasions or vacations. In the pictures, I was always smiling brightly, subconsciously leaning my body toward Clara. And Clara, for the most part, was just a cool, elegant profile, with a hint of resistance in her posture. In 3 years, I couldn't count how many cold looks she had given me. Thinking about those miserable days left a shadow of fear in my heart. I didn't want to see them ever again. Clara was right. She was in the pictures, too. I shouldn't take them. So, right there in front of her, I tore my half off every single photo, one after another, until the floor was covered in a carpet of scraps. I was only taking myself with me. Clara was stunned. She grabbed my wrist, her voice tight with an emotion I couldn't place. "Adam!" Her eyes were suddenly red-rimmed. I yanked my hand away and gave her a sarcastic smile. "Clara, you never cherished our time together, so why are you getting angry over some old photos?" After I finished packing, the once pristine apartment was a mess. Clara's brow was furrowed, her face grim and pale. But it didn't matter to me anymore. I had already taken everything that was valuable to me. The expensive watches and cufflinks she had bought me over the years, I didn't leave a single one behind. I had already traded the best years of my youth for the hardest lesson of my life. Between money and love, I had to have at least one. Before I left, I placed the apartment key gently on the coffee table, and right next to it, I left the engagement ring. After our unpleasant last encounter, Clara didn't try to contact me again. The news of our breakup and called-off engagement spread quickly through our circle of friends. Everyone who heard was full of regret. After all, Clara and I had been together for 3 years and were already engaged. We were just one step away from marriage. Julian, on the other hand, posted on his social media feed the day after we officially broke up. "What's mine? You can never take away." When a mutual friend told me about it, I just thought it was pathetic. My friend was worried for me. 3 years of your life, completely wasted. All that effort for nothing. Aren't you afraid you'll regret it later? I just shook my head. For the 3 years I was with Clara, I was constantly at war with myself. I was like someone on a sinking ship in constant peril. Since the ship was already going down, it was better to get off early and cut my losses. I finally got away from a toxic person and a toxic situation. You should be happy for me. After all, you can't go through life carrying garbage, can you? I told my friend. He gave an awkward laugh. I found out later that he was a messenger sent by Clara. My words got back to her, word for word. That day, she crumpled the medical paper she was writing on into a tight, angry bawl. But soon after, she looked out the window with a renewed sense of certainty. "No," she apparently said. "He'll be back. He can't handle living alone. He can't make it without me." Unfortunately for Clara, she was wrong. It's true that a big part of why I got together with her in the first place was because I couldn't stand the crushing loneliness of living by myself. I grew up with just my dad, and he was my only support system in the world. When he suddenly passed away, I lost the entire foundation of my life. I holed up at home for a long time afterward. I'd turn on the TV just to fill the silent room with sound. An empty house is too quiet. The loneliness is deafeningly loud. I started desperately clinging to anyone who came near me, including Clara. It seems that after being alone for too long, you can easily slide into what you think is love. I had hoped that love could fill the emotional void in my life. I had hoped that I could find a sense of security, something to rely on in her. But the truth is, when I was with Clara, the loneliness I felt was even greater than what I had shouldered alone. Because I got so much more disappointment from that relationship than I ever did comfort. Now I'm starting to reevaluate my life as a single person, starting to recognize my own importance, starting to accept that loneliness is an unerasable part of life. Without the shackles of marriage, without the constraints of being the future son-in-law to the Vance family, my life's possibilities have suddenly opened up. I quit my administrative job at her family's corporation. With my long-neglected certifications in hand, I found a new job in my actual field. Starting fresh meant I had to learn a lot from scratch, and I had to pour all my energy into it. Meetings, overtime, business trips, it was non-stop, but I didn't feel tired, because after all the hard work came visibly larger bonuses and a different kind of mental satisfaction that I had never experienced before. Half a month later, Clara found out that I had left her family's company. I had just gotten home from work that day, and she was sitting on my doorstep waiting for me. I had worked until 10 p.m. that night, so she must have been waiting for a very long time. It was turning into early winter, and she was only wearing a thin, camel-colored cashmere coat. Under the dim hallway lights, she looked fragile and thin. When she saw me, she immediately stood up and stumbled slightly as she grabbed my arm. "Why did you quit?" She glanced at my modest apartment and frowned. "Is the salary not enough for you to live on? I can ask my father to double it for you." "That has nothing to do with it," I said. I opened the door and blocked her when she tried to come inside. "Clara, we've already broken up. It's not convenient to have you here." Clara let out a small, derisive laugh. "You hate me that much? You'd rather hole up in this tiny place cooking for yourself than come back with me?" "This place isn't necessarily worse than the Vance home," I looked at her sarcastically. At her family's house, I not only had to walk on eggshells around her and endure her constant cold shoulder, but I also had to sacrifice myself and give everything I had to the family, just as her mother demanded. Clara was a proud and intelligent person. She understood exactly what I meant. Her face turned ashen. Without another word, she turned and left. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. It was from Julian. It was a photo of Clara, her eyes hazy with drink, slumped in the plush leather back seat of a car. The light hit her sharply defined features from above, and a few buttons on her collar were undone. The text read, "I don't know why she's so sad today, but it's okay. Tonight it's just us, 0 distance." I chuckled to myself. "Thanks for being so eager to pick up my trash," I typed back. "By the way, being so blatant about your cheating, aren't you worried your girlfriend across the pond will find out?" Julian called almost instantly, his voice raised in panic. "Adam, what do you think you're doing?" At this moment, Julian was panicking. A smile spread across my face as I pulled up the information my friend Mark had sent me earlier. On the left was a picture of Julian kissing his married, 40-something female advisor by the river in Cambridge. On the right was the academic paper he had published just before returning to the country, with data that was almost too perfect to be true. I imagine Clara would have no idea that the distinguished Dr. Julian Hayes enjoys being the other man, both here and abroad. Julian's life story was quite something. In college, while dating Clara, he was never without luxury goods she provided. But he ditched her without a second thought after graduation for the sake of his career. Abroad, he got involved with his advisor, who was over 40. He gritted his teeth through the gossip and managed to gain a lot of academic resources, making his path to a PhD incredibly smooth. But as exciting as a twisted romance can be, even Julian got tired of being an old woman's lover. So he pulled some strings and got a cushy position at a top hospital back in the States, the same hospital where Clara worked, and he started things up with Clara all over again. "You think Clara will care?" His voice suddenly became shrill. 6 years ago, I was the one who dumped her. I paused deliberately. "Do you think she'll find it harder to be dumped or to be deceived? Mr. Hayes, you love collecting trash so much I'll let you have it. But if you have the gall to bother me again, I can't guarantee these photos won't accidentally end up in your hospital's administrative inbox." After that warning, Julian never provoked me again. Maybe he was scared, or maybe he had a guilty conscience. But I didn't dwell on such a minor incident. After bringing some good results to my new company, they started to value me more, including me in important projects. Late one night, after a long dinner meeting filled with toasts and networking, it was finally over. My senior colleague and I saw the last client into their car. When the dust settled, I was the only one left standing in the cold night wind, along with a beautifully wrapped gift box in my hand. I rubbed my sore ankles and turned to go home. A familiar Audi R8 drove up from a distance and stopped directly in front of me. The window rolled down, revealing a woman's refined, elegant profile. It was Clara. Her eyes were fixed on the gift box in my hands. She stared for a long moment before speaking, her voice laced with ice. "Who gave you that?" I smiled. "None of your business." Clara stared at me, her gaze turning dark and speculative. "Adam, is this the reason you refuse to come back? Don't you think you owe me an explanation? We only broke up a month ago." I was both angry and amused. "Are you insane? Not everyone is like you, getting tangled up with an ex while still in a relationship." Clara's face was cold as she unbuckled her seatbelt, walked over, and grabbed my wrist. Her brows were tightly knitted. "Adam, Julian and I never crossed any lines. We never had any physical relationship after we broke up, and I didn't cheat. I always considered you my fiancé." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Never crossed any lines? Clara, do you take me for a fool? Were your intimate displays at the hospital not enough? Or is the fact that you were with Julian both times you got drunk not strong enough evidence for you? In the 3 years we were together, there was no care, no affection, just a cold, business-like distance. And now you're going to stand here and hypocritically say you always thought of me as your fiancé? Don't you think that's laughable?" Clara faltered, her eyes dimming with a flicker of shame. She finally softened her tone. "Julian means nothing to me emotionally anymore. I stopped loving him a long time ago, and I have absolutely no intention of getting back together with him. But regardless of that, I hurt you. I can't deny that, and I apologize." Her gaze darkened. Seeing her apologize to me, bow her head to me for the very first time, made her look somewhat pathetic. "As for you saying I didn't care for you, it was my fault for not remembering your birthday or your preferences. It was my fault for not waiting for you when we walked. But Adam, I didn't know how to love before, and I let you down. I know now, and I know how to love you. Adam, please come back. That home isn't a home without you. We lived together for 3 years. How can you just leave?" She gripped my shoulders, looking at me with a desperate, pleading expression, her eyes red and glistening with tears. This was the first time I had ever seen Clara so discomposed, so proud, and yet for the first time her face was a picture of utter defeat. Even the belt of her expensive trench coat was tied crookedly. For Clara, this was a major flaw. How ironic. When I was with her, trying everything I could to please her, she watched with cold, detached indifference, completely ignoring me. Now that I've left her, she regrets it. Too little. Too late. I pushed her away forcefully. Clara, it took a lot for me to move on. I'm not going back. After that, I didn't see Clara for quite some time. I only heard from mutual friends that she had been very down lately. She often came to work smelling of alcohol. She wouldn't go out after work, preferring to shut herself up at home, alone. Adam, Clara hasn't been able to move on since you two broke up, one of them told me. She still has very strong feelings for you. She cares about you a lot. I found that laughable. People who have a clear conscience in a relationship tend to move on quickly after a breakup. It's only those who wronged someone else who are consumed by regret and can't seem to move on. That's not deep love. That's just being a terrible person. As for this caring they talked about, it probably only existed in Clara's empty words. If she truly cared, how could she have constantly disregarded my feelings, letting me drown in my own hurt day after day? How could she have strode so far ahead while I practically trotted to keep up behind her? How could she have been completely oblivious to whether I was tired, if my shoes were comfortable, or if I could even keep up with her relentless pace? But Clara didn't have much time to wallow in her self-pity. The news about Julian being the other man blew up. That day, the story of Julian being his female advisor's lover while he was abroad, while simultaneously having an affair with Clara and interfering in someone else's relationship, went viral. Within 2 hours, it was the talk of the internet. One day he's this woman's lover, the next he's in someone else's bed. Does this guy just love being the other man? They're both trash. If you're going to be a homewrecker, you obviously have no shame. He's probably used to the insults by now. That female doctor is pathetic too. What a mess. Suddenly, Julian and Clara were at the center of a massive media storm. After the drama subsided, the cheating advisor had her teaching license revoked and was fired from her prestigious position. Julian was investigated by the university, had his degree rescinded, his internship terminated, and was unceremoniously kicked out of the hospital. And Clara, her reputation completely ruined by the public scandal, was forced to resign. After the storm passed, my friend Mark came to see me. "Was that online stuff you're doing? Awesome." I shook my head. "Dude, you're still too soft," he said, indignant. "Those two were so disgusting, especially that Julian guy seducing a married woman and then provoking you to your face. You shouldn't have let them off so easy." I smiled faintly. I may not have orchestrated the online mob, but I did mail the photos of Julian and his advisor to her husband. He had a right to know the truth. Kindness is my nature, but I won't be walked over. I knew from the very beginning that I couldn't stir up much trouble on my own. After all, I had been a low-level administrator at the Vance Family Corporation for 3 years, with no real power or connections. Any news I tried to release would probably have been suppressed by them immediately. But the advisor's husband was different. He came from a powerful family, was a respected figure in academia himself, and had extensive connections throughout the city. When faced with his wife's infidelity, he would not be merciful. 6 months later, thanks to my excellent performance at my new job, I was promoted to manager and was about to transfer to another city to oversee a new branch. The day I left, the sky was clear and bright. Clara, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, suddenly appeared at my door. After 6 months, she looked much more worn out. the confident spark in her eyes replaced by a weary sadness. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Her gaze fell on the suitcase in my hand, and a bitter smile reached her eyes. "I heard you were leaving. I came to see you off." She reached out to take the suitcase from my hand. I politely took half a step back. "I can manage on my own." A look of deep disappointment was clear on Clara's face. She came to stand next to me again, walking shoulder to shoulder as we headed for the elevator. Just like a long, long time ago. Except this time, she finally remembered to slow down, as if she were deliberately waiting for me. But this time I sped up, walking ahead of her, leaving her standing there in a daze in the middle of the hallway. I looked back, gave her a small wave, and said, "This is far enough." The person I am today is no longer obsessed with being loved, no longer relies on others to dispel loneliness, and no longer fears loss. I don't care if she waits for me anymore. I don't need a woman to slow her pace for me, because I will work hard on my own, walk ahead of her, and go see my own mountains.